Richard.
Or Richard. No.
Yeah, Alex probably.
All right, we are live on Facebook. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, good friends on Facebook Live. Well, it was a long time since we had an all men forum here, and this is the day we have been feeling for many months, you know, in the minority here. So I'm very happy to share this screen with two great friends for different reasons, because not everyone here supports Liverpool. But we want to say welcome to Pastor Adam Keough.
Hey, Julian. It's lovely to be here with you this evening and with Ian and all you guys who are watching.
Good evening.
Is it all right if we call you Adam?
Of course, yes. Please do, always.
Yeah. Well, Ian and I are co-hosting tonight, and so, you know, of course, you know, hopefully by the end of the hour we will hear some embarrassing story about you and Ian. You know, it will come naturally.
There are many.
Some are tellable on Facebook and some aren't.
Yeah. But we, you know, I was, you know, like we were sharing a little bit earlier, you know, we had a good time at Newbold College together. It was, that was really good times back then. And so we share the being fellow Newbold alumni.
That's right, Julian. The first memory I remember of you, well, actually, one of the main memories I remember of you at Newbold is you always calling across Newbold campus saying, Adam, are you coming to play in goal?
Well, you know, you were the best goalie, you know, and for our brotherhood team, you know, when we started getting competitive and we would play even the nearby pub teams, you know, you were the best goalie, you know. I have to, you know, and I always pick the best. You see what I mean? That's what, you know, Ian is here because he's the best at what he does. So, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was the best because I was the only goalie. That's the only thing.
So what would be a typical result of the team then? Would it be lots of wins, lots of losses, or about even?
Well, I don't know. The goalie was special. I think from what I remember, at least, the goalie let about 6 in every game, right? So we had to score more than that every... No.
Everything was happening at that time, you know. We were getting all sorts of results. So it's kind of like how the season has been this time for Liverpool. You know, we were at the mountaintop, but we thought we need to show humility, right?
That's right. We need to practice the pause when it comes to winning, right?
Yeah, well, he pressed pause. I think Jurgen Klopp, you know, he pressed pause, and when a German apparently hits the pause button, you know, it's difficult to unpause it. So, but so this brings us to our subject. And listen, what a great message from you on Saturday. And okay, you know, we were having a good time, but I'm very serious. We were very blessed to get to hear and to watch you preach. You know, and, you know, it brought back memories of me of this excellent, you know, the preaching class at Newbold. And I appreciated the fact, you know, and you were pausing a lot during your message.
Really?
No, it was intentional. It was great. I mean, it was perfect delivery. I appreciated it very much.
Well, you know, I think that the Bible is very relevant, isn't it, to our everyday life, right?
Yes.
And God is very, very relevant to our everyday life. And so I guess we can only expect that when we think on spiritual things, those spiritual things should be relevant to our everyday life too.
That's right. That's right.
So one of the things which you shared with us, obviously, we're going through a time unlike any other. I know particularly over there in Ireland, the lockdown situation is quite similar to how we have here in the UK. So what have you been able to do during lockdown to kind of beat the monotony of things? So every day we see the same things on the news. We can only travel certain distance. We can't really meet up and socialise. Our movements are quite restricted. So as the weeks go by, it becomes very monotonous. So what do you do to try and beat that monotony, which we are dealing with every day?
Well, I guess I should probably start by saying I don't feel as if I've beaten the monotony, right? You know, it was kind of a bit cool to do this for the first 6 weeks, you know, last kind of March and April. You know, it was a new thing. But then over here, at least in Dublin, in the Republic of Ireland, we kind of were open up, I think, very much like England. We were opened up kind of July, August, September, and that's when things went into the darker months and things, and we began to close down. And I think that a lot of people have quite experienced this monotony that you're talking about, Ian, right? And I think a lot of people are struggling with it. But one of the things that I must say, if I had picked one thing that I have done to beat this monotony, shall I say, I'm not sure I've completely beaten it, but and I'm so thankful that it's the bit brighter weather now, because that helps so much. It's unbelievable how much of sunshine helps your mental health. But I think, you know, one thing I've really enjoyed is spending so much more time studying the Sabbath school lesson, right? And for me, I've spent a little bit more time, I must say, during this lockdown period studying the Sabbath school lesson every day, compared with what I did previously in the mornings. And I think that that's kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure how studying the Sabbath, but what it's done for me, right, is that experience with God, that time to break, for a pause, even though it's at the beginning of the day. It's kind of a pause in time. I think it's kind of helped me. Do you know what I mean? Personally, at least, because I love study, and not everybody loves study, right? So maybe that's not going to help everybody, pausing for an hour to do Bible study in the morning, but it's helped me at least.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm also thinking about my own experience, you know, over here as a pastor in this in the north of England. You are now currently, you're serving in Ireland, and you're in Dublin, and you are ministering as well. Apart from your local churches, also you have special responsibility for the youth, right, Adam? And
No, not anymore, but
not anymore?
it used to be like that, yeah.
Okay. But you do have a very strong active, you know, youth group, you know, so I would be very, now, of course, at the Ringway, we have, you know, we have young adults, we have young men like Ian, you know, and Jenna, you know, and, it must be particularly hard for a particular age group, you know, but I guess it's been difficult. It's been challenging for all of us, but, you know, especially people that are more active. And, you know, I know, you know, you guys, for instance, that you take walks, you are very much active and healthy, but it's, but, you know, talking about what we take in, and kind of like we talk about the, you know, practicing the pause. And, you know, for me, it was a blessing to listen to your message, because I felt, I mean, I took myself, you know, despite my experience, my long experience of working as a minister, as a pastor, I realized, you know, wow, you know, I haven't really taken advantage of it, you know, and I've been avoiding practicing the pause. So personally, you know, I felt really blessed by your message, because I could see where I needed to improve in my own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, you know, it's like going to the petrol station, isn't it? If you don't take time to go to the petrol station, you'll run out of fuel, right? And sometimes we can even be so engaged in helping other people, right, that we forget that we need to help ourselves. And I guess during lockdown, you know, we've been focusing a lot on mental health. The government's been talking about mental health, I'm sure in England, just like in Ireland here, and it's focusing on, you need to take care of yourself. You know, when the mask comes down in the aircraft, you've got to put your own mask on before you put someone else's mask on, you know. And even to help even to help your own kids or your family or whoever it is, to reach out to them with the love of Jesus, you've got to have that kind of, I don't know, infused into your own life. Do you know what I mean? Kind of, you know, you got to put a tea bag in the tea to kind of get that infusion. And I think that means time in the Bible for me.
I like that analogy. So one of the things you mentioned in your sermon, which is so appropriate, you bring up mental health, and that's kind of an underlying theme all the way through. And I suppose it's become far more apparent during this time when we're separated from friends, we're separated from family, that we don't realise how that separation gradually over the sort of the days, the weeks, the months go by, how big an impact it has. And you brought up that quite an interesting analogy between uncertainty coupled with a lack of faith. And that's something which I kind of never really sort of thought of in that context before. So if we look at how we can reach out to our audience tonight, or the people we come into contact with, is there anything you could maybe suggest as just a few simple points as to how do we approach that question to maybe somebody who's maybe quite young in the faith, or they can't really understand what's going on with this uncertainty? How can we try and bridge the gap between lack of faith or faith and uncertainty? How we can bring those two together a little bit?
Yeah, I think you're right, Ian. And I think that, you know, I hear it quite often, right? You can't be worried about things if you're a person of faith. You shouldn't worry about things, maybe, right? And I think what that does is it really reduces faith, and it reduces this natural, well, emotion, shall we say, since sin's come into the world, that all of us experience worry, right? And worry is coupled with uncertainty, really, because when we're uncertain of the future, we worry a lot. And so for me, you know, Jesus says, you know, don't worry, right? He says, you know, but I'm not sure he means don't worry about the immediate future. He doesn't mean don't be concerned, I don't think, about the immediate future, right? We know that everything is going to be okay in the end, we might say, for the Christian, right? We all know, yeah, we're going to go to heaven, right? But that doesn't mean we don't have issues of uncertainty and stress and worry and things here on earth, right? And some of us who are here and listening today might be going through times where they've got cancer, where they've lost a loved one, and they're dealing with this uncertainty of losing someone in the pandemic. Do you know what I mean? And they just can't get over it. To me, these are not crises of faith. And we have to separate this concept of believing in God and trusting in God for these times that we actually go through real issues and real kind of times of worry. Because if we keep saying that, like, you have a lack of faith because you worry, right, then everybody's going to give up. Right? And I don't think that's sensible.
Yeah. So that statement around kind of not worrying and God looking after the sparrows, and if he looks after them, how much more great will he look after you? Do you think that is more looking towards the second coming, rather than kind of worrying about the day-to-day things that we're kind of caught up in at the moment, or is it a bit of both?
I'm just looking at it here. I mean, he's even in the passage before, right? Jesus says, I mean, this is the Sermon on the Mount here, right? And Jesus, even in the passage before, is talking about treasures in heaven, storing up treasures in heaven, right? And for me, I think that Jesus is okay. In verse 27 of Matthew 6, he says, "Can any one of you can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to his life? He's not saying don't worry there, right? He's saying, well, it's actually no point in worrying. He's not going to say you don't worry, right? Oh, we all know there's no point in worrying, but we actually can't control that sometimes. Do you know? And for me, this is what we've all experienced so much over the last few months, this uncertainty. And uncertainty to me and worry seem to go quite close hand in hand, although I haven't worried too much, right, to be honest, but I have a lot of uncertainty. So it doesn't always go hand in hand. But maybe uncertainty is the biggest stressor in some ways. I mean, I did mention when I was speaking in the message about a BBC article I read. And it was very, very interesting that this article, I think it was the BBC anyway, the writer was basically saying, you know, when your routine is disrupted, right, your regular routine, so whether it's getting up, going to school, or getting up, going to work, and all these things, when your routine is disrupted, then your mental health is challenged, right? Because routine actually helps these sensors in the brain not get too excited, right? And when we go out of that routine, right, all of these mental health sensory receptors and things, they start to get excited and they're working overtime, shall we say, maybe not excited. And actually routine helps with that. And then we're out of routine, everything kind of goes crazy, and we're completely, all of us are out of routine at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Even if we're working from home, we're kind of, routine's been disrupted somewhat at least.
Talking about routine, Adam, that was one of the points that I appreciated actually, because I think we can still make, you know, you talk about the importance of routine, but, you know, even in this, let's say, well, uncertain times, or let's say far from ideal situation that we are in, all of us, I guess, in the entire planet, we can still practice those routines, I guess you can call spiritual disciplines. I'm connecting it to what Ian said, and I thought it was very interesting because, you know, Jesus, in the end of that passage, he says, don't worry about, therefore, at the end of the day, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Matthew 6:34. So it kind of like puts you in a little bit in a routine. So the idea is, you know, you have today, but, you know, if you actually bother to to practice, to pause for today, you will see that you will not have to worry about tomorrow, which brings it, I think, to, and maybe Ian, you can help us with one of the questions we asked our great friends on Facebook, and Kaya is there helping us out. It's about the relationship. How has your relationship with God and your prayer life changed this last year? Right, Ian, but you can take it from there.
So this is one of the questions which were posted out. So Ben has said, it hasn't changed much, to be honest. I pray just as much as I've always done. And Noelle has commented, my trust in God has increased as I've learned to take one day at a time and not to worry about the future, but to leave it all in God's hands. I think I've certainly noticed in the past sort of 12 months, there's been 2 or 3 occasions when I think when you are down on your knees and you are in a state of desperation, it's only then that you can actually pause with you stop all the chaos, all the noise, because you have no other choice but to stop. And it's then when I found God does talk to you and you do have that chance to connect. And more often than not, the answers are so easy that you think, why didn't I do this before? Why have I spent weeks stressing and worrying about something? And that's, to me, I've spent a lot more time pausing, praying, rather than trying to do it my way and fight and end up in trouble, only to just pray. And the answers time and time again have come through.
I think you're right. And, you know, you'll probably think it's weird saying this, but some of the most stressed times I've been in, when I've prayed, I've fallen asleep, right?
You do fall asleep quite a lot, though, Adam.
It's true, but the reason I say that is because I've prayed, and I find that when you pray about something, you're really worried about it, right? for me, and maybe this is half a dozen times in my life when I've been really stressed about something, right? And I've prayed and I've fallen. It's like God has removed this kind of like weight that was on my shoulders, right? And I've literally just then been okay to fall asleep, as if, you know, I'm not worried staying awake kind of thing. And I'm not talking about in the middle of the night praying. I'm talking about in the middle of the day, you know, and slept for half an hour. It's like this worry's fallen from my shoulders. And I think this routine that you're talking about, Ian's really important, that we don't just, you know, that we don't just do this when we're really stressed, right? And that's part of what I guess is the core of what we've been talking about in this message, right? It's actually a routine of not doing this just when we're stressed, but actually getting into this habit every single day to do it.
Yeah, I think Kaya, she sort of echoed that in some ways, because she said, when I was on furlough, I did pray more, read more, sang praises to God more. I had more time to do all that which I really enjoyed. And I think that's something which we found last year through the summer. Where we live, we're right by the River Mersey. So within 5 minutes of our house, you're down away from houses, just walking on the riverbank, enjoying nature. And I've lived around here for all my life. And I found places 10 minutes walk from where I've grown up, which I never knew existed. Because I don't know if you found that, Adam, when before lockdowns and all the restrictions, you tried to make weekends maybe a bit special. You'd make an effort to go a long distance. You'd do a lot more things, try to cram it into a very short space of time. But when you've got weeks and weeks and weeks where you cannot really do much, you've inevitably found time to do all the things that you really should have done. And as Kaya said, that's something she's been able to spend more time and create a better routine, because you can maybe plan your day a little bit more, because you don't have loads of things to do, because you've got weeks and weeks in which you can procrastinate in, I suppose.
And that's very interesting that Kaya said that, because the question then I would ask her, or ask any of us, in fact, is when we come out of this lockdown, right, and we begin to go back to the life which we knew before, which probably could be many months away, do you know what I mean? The question is how are we going to continue that pause? If we found it during the times that are slower, right, and built it into our routine, how are we going to continue with that when things speed up again? That's the challenge.
That kind of, I suppose, ties in with the mental health aspects, in that so many people have been set back in so many ways that inevitably that this change in environment, even though it might be more gradual, you are starting at a much kind of lower position to then try and build up with whatever the new normal ends up looking like. I think just on one final point on our question that Gentian raised, my prayer life has got deeper. I pray based on God's promises in the Bible.
You know, I like that, and because it kind of like, I would go a little bit further, you know, and say, well, you know, God, you have promised, kind of like, you know, not putting God on the spot, but, you know, I think that it has, the situation, this uncertain times, or this pandemic has brought us probably in a more intimate relationship with God. You know, Adam, for instance, Adam and I can talk once in 10 years, but, you know, we don't have any scruples. You know, we just go and we start sharing embarrassing stories about each other, like he did. But, you know, I mean, that's the close friendship. And I think with God, you know, he's saying, God, you have promised this and that. Now is the time, you know, to see this in my life. And I think if we have this interactive attitude, you know, with God, of course, you know, respectful, but yet at the same time assertive. We have great examples from Abraham and onwards, people that were haggling with God, and I think that's what he loves. He loves that kind of relationship that is very genuine, you know. So I appreciate that, you know, personally, you know, in terms of you know, being a little bit more daring when we talk to God, because sometimes we just, yeah, exactly. Who was it? David Marshall, you know, God in a Box, right? That famous book. I think it's from the 1950s. You know, when we put God in a small box, and our God will be as big as we imagine that box to be. You know, I mean, he's the creator of the universe, you know, and so, you know, those promises come in handy at this time, I suppose.
Yeah. And I like that. I wasn't around in the 1950s, but yeah, David Marshall's written some beautiful books about kind of relationship with God and things. And I think you're right, Julian. I think that as you spend more time in prayer, right, and now practicing the pause doesn't just have about spending time in prayer. It's not just about that, because we could talk about practicing the pause for a whole range of things, right? But I think the more you pray and the more time you spend in prayer, the more God kind of becomes someone, like you say, you can dialogue with. You know, it's like when you get to know, you know, when you get to know friends and people, you don't just have a kind of how are you today, and it's kind of one-way conversation, right? It's really a two, and sometimes you have arguments, and you know, Abraham maybe had an argument or two with God, you know what I mean, and maybe even Moses, but over time. But yeah, I think that's a really cool thing to say.
So we've got a couple more comments on from our audience on Facebook. Thank you everyone for contributing. So Kai commented that she creates her own routine every day, which helps her to cope really well, and time flew by as a result of probably having that structure in place. I felt I was in a very good place mentally too. Ben Horden made the comment, when applying for a job, I walked to the office and discovered an apple tree and found a cherry tree I'd walked past for years. So discovering things which we never realized were there by having the time to slow down and think a little bit. And Lawrence has said, I like to pick up on a point that Adam made about the routine. So psychologists, we always suggest keeping the routine is one of the best ways of helping children suffering from autism spectrum disorder to behave healthily and be focused on. And Kai's also commented she's been back at work since July, and it's not been easy to keep up with what I had while I was off work. I thought I'd try, but I've disappointed myself. I still try to spend time with God, but it's nothing like what it was then. I suppose that kind of is very, very appropriate with where we're kind of heading into now. As you're saying, in the next weeks, months, things will start to change such that we are getting back into more of a routine. But what kind of, if you say, what would be your top 3 suggestions if you were maybe doing a course on practicing the pause, maybe to somebody outside the church who they may be aware of God, they're aware of things, but they may not have a very, very strong faith at the time. What would be kind of your top 3 suggestions on how to recommend practicing the pause with that Christian kind of connection in their lives?
Number 1, practice the pause with your family. Do you know, and maybe I need to learn from this a little bit more from what I say, and practice the pause at least with those that are close to you, right? Maybe you don't have immediate family members, maybe you have some very close friends, you know, maybe you're a young adult and, you know, you're a university age and you're not living with your family or something at the moment, you know. Practice the pause with some people that are really close to you, that are really meaningful to you, and practice the pause doesn't necessarily have to relate to spiritual things, right? It can mean sit down and have a fun board game together, play Gartic.io. Do you know, that is a great game. Practicing the pause and actually just taking time for people, right? Being around people. And actually this week, you know, in the message, I talked about practicing the pause for others. Maybe I didn't emphasize that very much. I talked about taking the practice in the pause with God a lot more, right? But practice the pause with others. So I would say take time for other people. Do you know, we were created for relationships. And if we don't acknowledge that, right, we're going to suffer because of that. And so very often we're just kind of, even if I think about you, Ian, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, we used to talk to each other 2 or 3 times of the week on the phone, right?
Yeah.
And it's probably once a month now, if we're lucky, and maybe
Well, but as you say, trying to find a block of time to physically talk on the phone. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And what we have to do then is we have to be intentional about practicing the pause. And I guess this was the point of what I was actually trying to get across. We have to be intentional about that. So I would say practice the pause for others. All right. One thing that I didn't mention in the message when I recorded it for Ringway, but I did when I wrote it before, was actually practice the pause for mission or service, right? And I think that will resonate with everybody, no matter whether you're a Christian or not, right? A lot of people these days engage in social service for other people, and I think that's really important. Because when we practice the pause for relationships with others, but also for service to others, it's something which actually kind of fills our souls to some extent, right?
Fine. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And so practice the pause to find some time to do voluntary work, whether it's feeding the homeless with the charity who already does it, whether it's, even if it's just talking over the fence with your neighbor, right? Because your neighbor's elderly, or two doors down, right? Or practice the pause, bake them a loaf of bread if you bake, or, get the kids to design them a thank you card, or a card that just says, hi, happy birthday, if you know their birthday or something, so practice the pause to love others, and I think they would be the top 2 things at least. But always practicing the pause for God, because if we don't practice the pause for God, I think that we fail to realize that we have a spiritual dimension to us as human beings. Because God designed us, and even the Sabbath day, right? God designed us to practice the pause, right? In fact, he knew he inbuilt in this system in us that it was important to practice the pause. And if we're trying to keep going and going and going, as if we've got, we're the Duracell bunny, it's not gonna work. We're gonna be exhausted in the end.
You mentioned the Sabbath, practicing the pause, and I'm just smiling here as a pastor because yes, it's true that I pause for the half an hour where I'm just eating like that before, the divine service, the second divine service. Sometimes you and I, we know what we're talking about, and then at 3 o'clock there is a Bible study on Sabbath, and I was smiling, and in one of my 4 churches, just last Sabbath, they said, Pastor, I was able to preach, and we had a blessed time together. And then they said, Pastor, you know that you are leading the Bible study in 2 hours, right? At 3 a.m. Wow. I said, you really, yes, of course. I said, how long? Maybe half an hour, No, take your time. They meant it correctly. So what I did, this is where I did the Albanian cheeky thing. See, Adam, there's still a bit of me that is Albanian, So I delegated the Bible study to my better half, to Trixie. So she did it. But let me know. So I decided, I took my daughter, practicing the pause for family, right? Took my daughter for a walk. I hadn't done in 2 weeks, And lo and behold, I go there in a situation, I will probably not share the details now. And then, I was already some complete stranger said to me, are you a pastor? I was in the woods, and it turned out to be, and we prayed together. And, it left a big impression on me. And I was very, and I was like, well, I did practice the pause, but, I think, like you said, when we make intentional time, whether it is for family, or or for God, or for mission. Last weekend I was in Bury, which is not the most affluent part of Greater Manchester, and the community action that is taking place there. And these are people, not necessarily all of them are Christian members of the church. You know what I mean? These are people that have a sense of a strong sense of mission. When you do those, there is a blessing. So in all these 3 occasions, there is a blessing. But gentlemen, I just wanted to turn it to maybe to include comments now. I think we've already asked the question, maybe to some of our friends on Facebook Live. Do you already, or have you already practiced the pause in your life? This is before the message from Pastor Adam on Saturday. And how do you do it, or how did you do it? It would be great to get some feedback on that. But maybe in a couple of, maybe we have done it unaware.
Absolutely, because we can learn from each other, right? And that's the joy of Christian community. We're actually called to learn from each other.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of comments just to finish off our previous question. Jenna had made a few points to say that the days she worked out a new routine, she felt better. So whilst we've kind of had a lot of doing the same thing every day because there's not much else to do, putting that new routine, and she just agreed that the sun we've had the last few days made a great difference. And then she commented that when we start to come out of this lockdown, that we can continue the pause. I'm sure confirm that spending more quality time together has brought us closer, walking in nature and talking. And this is something that Jenna and I, as she sort of raised the question for me to comment on, we've got so much closer as a couple by pausing with each other, by not having all the routines, all the things we try and get done in the week. We've got so much more time to do things spread out that we spent an awful lot more time talking out in nature, even though the weather's not great, being able to get out and do a lot more. So that, for us as a couple, that's been a huge benefit for us. So the question which we asked our audience about whether people already practice the pause and how do you do it? And your good lady wife, Heather, commented, since lockdown, I've made much more effort to smile and talk to people I encounter because so many people are lonely. It might be the only positive encounter that they have in that day. And I think that's been so critical. As we're walking around, inevitably you're walking down a pavement and it's kind of the shuffle. Do we go left? Do we go right? Who steps in the road to give some space for people to go past? And certainly in our neighborhood here, so many more people let on. We've got to know so many more people by having that little bit of a pause to comment on the weather, or if they've got a dog or something. So for us, that's been it's been a fantastic opportunity to get in, to speak to people more. And even if it just might be a quick hello, as Heather said, it might be the only thing, that positive thing that they've had in the day. And Noelle's commented, practice the pause reminded me so much of the words of the hymn number 500. Take time to be holy, all beautiful words.
I looked that up already and it's really beautiful. I don't know, maybe we'll leave, I'll just mention the first stanza, and then maybe in the end of the program we could go back to it. But take time to be holy, speak of it oft with thy Lord. This is the King James English. Abide in him always and feed on his word. Make friends of God's children. Help those who are weak, forgetting in nothing his blessing to seek. So, and then just the second one, take time to be holy. The world rushes on. Spend much time in secret with Jesus alone. By looking to Jesus, like him thou shalt be. Thy friends in thy conduct his likeness shall see. Wow.
Very nice, very nice. Hi, Jenna. Hi, Heather.
Yeah. So, it's very important. You gentlemen, you mentioned mental health, and for me, it's been a humbling experience talking to, operating from home mostly, and talking to different people, and not all of them church members, talking to also people that do not profess to be believers, but they would say, Julian, I know that you're a pastor, and, can you pray for me, or they would share things from, and so it's been for me, and many of them have shared, of course, private, concerns and the situation, and you can see the fragility of mental health. And so for me, from now on, Adam, I would be more intentional in saying, well, to start this, practicing the pause, because I can see that how that will be more beneficial for them from a routine perspective. You know what I mean? To be more systematic about it. I used to laugh years ago that when I was told by one of my mentors, to keep a journal, which again goes back to practicing the pause, reflecting. But I realized there was many things in my life where I, had unprocessed pain or hurt, and that's why I didn't want to go back there. And I thought journal is not for men like me, Mediterranean men like me, but it's wrong, because you need that introspection. When you don't, if you don't go there, then you end up in a dark place and you are very much alone. So that is, I think, by practicing the pause, that's when you get warmth. Normally you think, oh, I'm being vulnerable here, but that is the moment where you feel warmth all around, whether it's from God or family, or and like you said, close friends, but also those that you engage with, especially in whether it's a charity or community event, some altruistic initiative.
And I think you're right, Julian. I think it's about being intentional, right?
Yes.
Because we're often, we're pulled into things now, right? So we'll watch something on Netflix and then we'll get to the end and we just can't not watch the next thing, right? Because it's such a cliffhanger, right? And so, and that on Netflix's side is intentional, right? And we then just go into it unintentionally. So there are things that we really need to be intentional about. And if we want to grow, we have to be intentional to grow. Do you know what I mean? If we want to be influence people, we've got to be intentional about influencing people. Sometimes we kind of just drift along. And this is something which personally for me has kind of struck me in the last, say, 6 months, being intentional about trying to grow and to help other people to grow. And I think it's like you talk about, say, reflecting. Self-reflection is really, really important when you think about growing. And
I think one of the challenges which you often see people is they look at the problem and it's absolutely massive. They see this huge, great problem, and you're destined to fail straight away if all you see is this great big problem. I'm never going to overcome that, so I'm not even going to bother with it. And in my job, one of the things I spent many years doing as a business analyst is going to customers who have this huge, great problem and say, oh, we can never sort it out. And when you actually sit down with people and just break it down into its little constituent parts, and then, so that one big problem will break into maybe 3, and each of those break into 10, and you may end up with 200 tiny little problems. And when you're looking at that granularity, it may take 5 minutes to fix that one little problem. And gradually, as you work through, you end up very quickly finding you've got the answers to so many of those problems. And as you say, reflecting back, you can see, well, I would never have solved that one big problem, but I've fixed 15 little problems. So that success factor. And there's a brilliant, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's on YouTube. It's if you kind of just Google "make your bed," it's by the US Admiral William H. McRevan.
Yeah.
So he did this. That
went viral last year, I think.
He did, yeah. He did this address to the graduates of the University of Texas, and he's basically says, "Make your bed. If you want to do anything, the very first thing you do in the morning is make your bed. If the rest of the day is a complete disaster and you come home and your life's in tatters, at least you have that success to get into at night." I'm kind of paraphrasing it here slightly, but you have that one achievement. And that kind of ties in with what kind of the point I was making, that and it kind of ties in with, I suppose, the mental health bit as well, where we just see loads of big problems. How are we going to fix this? And say, take the pause, practice the pause, come back to God, reflect, and then just try and work through in little bits, just little steps. And before you know it, those big issues can quite easily be, and I'm speaking from experience here, it can quite easily be just broken up into little bits. And the feeling of success when you've fixed 5 little things is fantastic. And then you can then build on that success.
And that's where I think God is the best business analyst, right? Or God is the best bed maker.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why, because what I experience in my own life is that, especially when I read the Bible, God tackles some of those little things, right? It's uncanny sometimes how, whether you're reading the Sabbath school lesson and it has nothing to do with what you've been thinking about, how on that particular day suddenly it relates to what you're thinking about, right? And so I think God, one thing that for me, as I spend time with God, he does that breaking down for me in some ways. So I don't need to maybe worry about these big, and we come back to worry again. Maybe it's, we've got this big problem that we're trying to solve. And often I experience, at least, as I study the word of God, as I pray and think about it, this big thing gets broken up by him into little chunks kind of thing, and therefore it seems much more easy to manage.
Yeah, I think the feeding of the 5,000 is probably a great example of that. You can picture kind of the disciples saying, where are we going to get 5,000 plates and 5,000 knives and forks? And they're running around kind of panicking. It's simple. It's the problem as a very, very simple solution. And it's right here in front of us.
We, you mentioned the bed, and I thought at some point, I married a German. And I'm reminded every day of the importance of, not just making the bed, but, it's that kind of like the discipline and
Germanic efficiency.
Yeah. Yes.
Vorsprung durch Technik. Yeah. That's how advancement is made. No, but it's very true. But one thing that it's probably closer to my heart, because I came from a, let's say, atheistic background when I became a believer. So for me, and you mentioned it in the book of Acts, in the second passage, in Acts, when you talk about the apostles, Adam, and is that pausing on that concept of the Sabbath. But we talk a lot about the Sabbath, especially in the Adventist church. But the sunset Friday to sunset Saturday, right? But we have so many wonderful friends that are not believers. Even you can be agnostic, right? But I felt this is relevant. What a gift we have on the Sabbath, or the Shabbat, I guess, like from the Jewish perspective. But it's that day of the week, day of rest, of pause. And I felt, just wanted to, probably in the end, to maybe to have you share a little bit, on that, on the blessing and or on the benefits that can come from it. So this is a special day, I guess, it was set apart from the beginning.
And when I think often, for those of us who know very much about the Adventist church, I think we actually kind of, I'm not sure denigrate is the right word, but we look at the Sabbath as just like, it's a day to do this or not to do that, right? Yeah. I'm like, dude, don't look at it that way, right? Yeah. The Sabbath is a day, whether you're Christian or not, whether you care about Christ or not, it's relevant to you, right? And the Sabbath, if everybody would just take a pause for what is important in life and take a day to pause, even if they don't consider spirituality important, right? They would be blessed by the concept and the value of the Sabbath. Mm. And it amazes me that there's Sabbath sofa. I don't know if you've heard of it. I don't know where they started doing the Sabbath sofa. I can't remember. Where?
In Watford High Street, wasn't it?
Maybe Watford, or it was London or somewhere like that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
A brilliant idea. Do you know what I mean? I mean, because how many people would just benefit from, pausing for, even if it's for an hour or two, right? and just, you know, even if spirituality is not their thing, just pause to find something that can edify others and edify themselves, you know.
Here's the question for you. As a pastor, your life is very much about religion, about God, about working with people in your community. And Sabbath is often your busiest day of the week. As somebody who's, should we say, his calling is almost practicing the pause, how do you pause your work life with your own personal relationship with God?
Well, as Julian kind of said earlier, we don't practice the pause on Sabbath often, right? Sabbath for us is one of the, it's not always the busiest day of the week. Actually, since lockdown, it hasn't been one of the busiest days of the week, you know, even though we've got multiple things to do, right? Yeah. But for me, how I practice the pause, I guess I can't separate it from my work life, because, you know, we're not beings that can separate one thing from another. I can't separate my spirituality from my job, right? Because in many ways they're the same thing. But for me, the most important thing that I do, and I've got into a habit of doing it now, right? And I do it virtually every day of the week, Monday to Friday. I can't say this I do on a Sabbath or a Sunday, right? But Monday to Friday, the first thing I do when I come into my office is I start to study the Adventist Church's Bible study guide, the Sabbath school lesson, right? And the reason I choose the lesson is because it's just on tap. It's always there. Sometimes I don't like the author. Sometimes I hate the subject, right? But I always find that God is able to reach me through what I'm thinking about. So I spend generally half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour in the morning from 9 o'clock till, or 8:45, depending on when I get in my office, for half an hour, always half an hour at least, maybe more sometimes, just going through, and actually not just reading the Sabbath school lesson, but, you know, when they write a passage down, I read the whole context of it and everything. And I'm kind of just engaging with God in some ways. The other thing I do is I like to go out and walk, and I'll just go out and chill out in the hills. We love, you know, the mountains, Dublin mountains here are within our 5 kilometers even at the moment that we're allowed to travel. You know, I've only been out once because of the weather over the, but in the nice weather, just to go out and I walk around and I'd be like, I have a conversation with God. And when people come in the opposite direction or going to pass me with their dog and things, I shut up because I don't want them to think I'm crazy. But, you know, for me, that's what I kind of do. And for me, that's what's really important. And it doesn't have to, for anybody watching this, it doesn't have to be the Sabbath school lesson, right? But it's learning that consistency, right? And it's the consistency over time that helps you grow, right? It's not doing something once a week. Going to church once a week really doesn't help you grow. It just about sustains a decline in spiritual life, right? That's all we can say about the Sabbath. And I think one thing that lockdown probably has taught us, right? We can survive without going to the building if we have a personal relationship with Christ, right? And for many people, they won't. In fact, in America, they did a study, 25% of people, they reckon, won't come back to church after lockdown, right? Because those people have discovered church was all there was to their spiritual life, right? And now they don't have that. It's kind of gone kaput. And so this is why our own personal devotions are really, really important.
We've got a couple of points just come through from our audience on Facebook Live. Thank you everyone for their thoughts. So an absolutely fantastic one-liner from Natasha. Busy is a decision. That is very, very appropriate. And Katarina's commented, no doubt the pandemic made us practice the pause in so many different ways. Apart from many other lessons I could learn during this pandemic, I can't ignore how I felt God leading me through prayer by discovering the power of intercessory prayer and the power of fasting. These are things I've never not thought about doing before. And it was, if it was not for the lockdown, I doubt I would stop and think about it.
Mm.
So I think the lockdown has certainly made us have time, as Natasha said. Being busy is a decision. The decision to not be busy has been kind of forced on us in some ways. So to have that time to think about things which maybe have sat in the back of our mind, think, we always need to go and do this. We should always go and do that. We never get around to doing it. But this last 12 months we've been able to do so much more things as a result of not being busy.
Mm.
No, I reflect. I think Ian, you and I, we talk sometimes about how the progress has been made, from with Ringway overall online and where we were, I guess probably 12 months ago. So I smile. I think two things. Just basically, for me, the nighty walks did the trick. That became a routine for me. But at night, somehow, I don't know. I never got time. I didn't plan so well to take walks during the day. But late at night, not ideal, but it was very important for me. But when thinking about church and the amount of time I spent with a lot of parishioners, especially, that I say to them, listen, yes, we can't wait to reopen church, but the church was never primarily a building,
Mm-hmm.
Church is so much more than that. But I have to be patient. Of course, I have to be sensitive with a lot of them. But, and I think when I see progress, when I see these empowerment stories, when I see, of people daring to share more, about their spirituality, their walk with God, their successes and failures, when I see that warms my heart, because that's where I see church. We are here, the three of us and all of our friends together right now live on Facebook. This is church, and this should continue to be a part of it. And so it's been an enriching experience, I guess, or probably has given us an extra uncertainty, right? While living under uncertain times, a kind of a special certainty that God is so relevant, in every aspect of our lives. We don't need to think completely outside the box. We can just dare to take a step, and then it will happen. But it's food for thought, But again, great message. Practicing to pause.
Maybe I don't know what time you finished, but maybe I can share one text that I didn't, and it was at the conclusion of the sermon. All right. It's from Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30. And this is the words of Jesus, in fact. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And I think it's amazing that Jesus, when we actually come to him, right? The challenge is we don't make the time, or don't intentionally make the time often to come to Jesus. And when we do come to him, he'll feed us. And I think that's beautiful. And in these uncertain times, man, it's so important. And I'm amazed. I don't know if it's like with Ringway Church, but here in Ranelagh, I've started a Bible study on Tuesday evenings, for example, with people that have contacted our church because they live in uncertain times and they realize that there's something going on in the world and they need spirituality in their life. Do you know what I mean? And it's amazing to be able to do that. So.
Well, that is fantastic to hear, and we have this little stories of hope and people contacting us in the most unusual ways. Time is against us now, and I appreciate your resume, Adam, for tonight. And we're gonna take, I think, Ian, right? We're gonna take prayer requests, and we're gonna kindly ask Pastor Adam to pray for us and pray for everybody and their requests online. You know, in the meantime, then I'll just so you know, before you take over this time, the last two stanzas from that famous hymn, from the hymn 500. Take time to be holy, let him be thy guide, and run not before him, whatever betide, in joy or in sorrow, still follow the Lord, and looking to Jesus, still trust in his word. Take time to be holy, be calm in thy soul, each thought and each motive beneath his control, thus led by his spirit to fountains of love, thou soon shalt be fitted for service above. Take time, practice to pause. Thanks, Noeli, as well, for that suggestion of a beautiful hymn. Yeah.
So we don't have any specific prayer requests posted on Facebook Live, but I'm sure, like in your own church there in Ranelagh, we have members of our congregation who are sick. They're struggling. They're looking for work, and I think sort of it's a common story which we hear across the world, really. But we have that wonderful promise, which is at the moment when you're at the very, very bottom, the only way is up, and God is at the very top, leading us in that way. So let's ask you, like to close our Monday Live with a prayer, please, Adam.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
God, we want to thank you for this moment to pause in time. And even though the clock stops ticking, our hearts keep ticking. And Lord, we thank you for this moment to just rest and to remember you. We thank you, Lord, that even though we do live in uncertain times, that, Lord, you have promised to walk with us. In fact, you say that as you walk with your people, that you will work in their lives to bring about the best you can in their lives. And Lord, I thank you that you have promised to walk with each one of us. And at this moment in time, for us, that means in different ways. For those of us who are worried about loved ones, walking with us may mean just we need some comfort and peace at the moment. And I pray for those of us who need that at this time, Lord, that we may find some comfort and peace in you. We may find some comfort and peace in the community of Christians, if we're part of a Christian community, and from our families too. I pray, Lord, for those who are struggling with work, and money and finances are such a big thing, Lord, at the best of times, yet alone when we're facing no work or lost jobs or whatever it might be. And I pray, Lord, for each one of us who faces that at the moment. Lord, you have promised that you will provide for all of your people. And Lord, I'm sure we could share testimonies about your provision over the years gone by, but I just pray at this time that you will give each one of those who are struggling with that peace at the moment. For those of us who have health anxiety and are worried about the future, Lord, we know that the future is in your hands. Help us to come to the point where we can trust you. We know, even though that we may not know what the future holds, that you hold the future. And so I pray for each one of us who's engaging on Facebook or wherever they're watching this, if it's after the program's finished, Lord, that you would touch our lives and you would be a very real God to us, not just a God of 2,000 years ago or a God of 4,000 years ago or a God of 6,000 years ago, but a God that's very present and real in our everyday lives today. So I pray for each one of us, Lord, that you would be like that in our lives, and that as we see you like that, Lord, it kind of comes naturally to want to practice the pause a little bit more, to spend time with you. And I pray that we will. We'll find time for you, we'll find time for others, and we'll find time enrich the lives of others in mission and service to others as well. And so thank you for this time that we've been able to be together tonight, to talk together, to chat about your goodness and kind of, Lord, who you've called us to be and your vision for who you want us to be as your people, as your community in an uncertain world. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you so much. Thanks, gentlemen.
Adam, thank you, Julian.
We have excellent material. This will be available, of course, also on our YouTube channel, or youtube.com/Ringway Church. Just like in our, it will continue to stay on our web page, where, that Ian is an award-winning page, ringwaychurch.org.uk. All credit to Ian.
All credit to the designers who make life much easier, and we just have to push a few buttons.
But we look forward to inviting you again, Adam, and my hope is that Liverpool will be reaching the top 4 by then.
Well, it's been lovely to be here with you, and it may be next year or the year after if we're waiting for Liverpool to reach the top 4, to be honest. But it's been nice to be with you this evening, and I extend a hello to everybody I know in Ringway. I know some of you there, and it's maybe in the future sometime we'll get to see each other in person as well. So who knows?
Lovely.
Absolutely, and then we'll make an Ireland trip. We will dare to enter the EU territory. All right.
Right.
Okay, then good night, everyone, and thanks again, Kaya, and everybody else on Facebook with moderation. Ian, thanks again, and greetings to Ireland.
Yes, thank you. Take care. Greetings to your church, and I'll send ours the same, Julian.
Okay.
Night now. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.